Is this the place where my husband's funeral is? Suddenly, Linda, Michael's wife, appeared with a clatter of her heels, leading her granddaughter, Sarah, by the hand, who is significantly thinner than I remembered. Linda, where have you been all this time? Well, Margaret, how brazen of you to say that after you've driven us away. I'm taken aback by her words. Indeed, due to certain circumstances, I had already found out where she had been, so my words did feel hypocritical. But it wasn't me who drove them away. They left on their own accord. Ignoring me, she spreads her arms like a tragic heroine, desperately appealing to those around her. Everyone, please listen. When I told her my husband had a serious illness and needed care, she suddenly came and drove Sarah and me out. She said she would take care of her son herself and that outsiders should leave. She threatened me with the police if I came back, saying she'd report us. We were kicked out without money. Sarah has become so ragged. Thankfully, we could go back to my parents' house, but if not, who knows what would have become of us? Well, I don't expect someone who wants her son's inheritance and drives out his wife and granddaughter to care about us. Linda tries to garner sympathy from the onlookers with an exaggerated display of tears. The sight of her emaciated granddaughter only reinforces her narrative of being the tragic wife driven out by a monstrous mother-in-law for the son's inheritance. Just as Michael feared would happen, I sigh. I had prepared for something like this just in case, but never thought it would actually come to this. What are you talking about? Despite having informed her of my son's funeral, she came late. And then she starts making all these accusations. The one making accusations without any basis is you, Margaret. I was just worried about Michael. Can you really say you were worried about Michael after this? I pull out an envelope and a DVD that had been in my bag for a long time. To an outsider, it would look like a normal envelope. Not just Linda, but other relatives watching the proceedings were puzzled. I apologize for the timing. However, there's something I must convey to everyone here before the funeral starts. Please bear with me for this brief moment. One afternoon, the doorbell rang to announce a visitor. Who could it be? My name is Margaret. I had some idea of who might come to visit me. Mostly neighbors, though not all visitors were welcome. Peeking outside, I was dismayed to see an unwelcome visitor. Here again. I sighed involuntarily. But I couldn't ignore her and reluctantly responded. Yes, I'm coming now. Saying so, I immediately went to the door to greet the visitor. Hello, Margaret. I'm sorry to come over like this, but could I ask for your help again? As soon as I opened the door, there she was with Linda. With her ingratiating voice, Michael's wife and mother of their child, living separately. Again, Linda, I just gave you some money last week. Upon hearing this, Linda approached with a look of apology. I know, but there have been so many expenses for Sarah. Please, Margaret. Mentioning my granddaughter Sarah makes it hard for me to refuse. I agreed reluctantly. All right. I understand. How much do you need this time? Thank you, Margaret. So, here's how much. Linda told me the amount with a broad smile, and I sighed for what felt like the umpteenth time. It makes me wonder when Linda started asking me for money. She wasn't like this when she first got married. It probably started after Sarah was born. My son Michael works for a trading company and earns a considerable amount. He's not stingy and should be providing Linda, a housewife, with enough for daily expenses and a generous allowance. Yet, Linda keeps coming to me asking for money, claiming Michael doesn't give her enough. Worried that I might end up making Sarah live in poverty, and unable to turn a cold shoulder when my adorable granddaughter is brought into the conversation. As a grandmother, I inevitably end up giving in to her requests and handing over money. And I even agreed to keep it a secret from Michael. If asked whether I hadn't been suspicious about what she needed the money for, I'd be lying. But at that time, with my granddaughter being brought into it, I simply handed over the amount Linda asked for, unaware of her hidden ugly nature. Weeks after these repeated financial transactions, an incident occurred. Having finished all the housework that needed to be done by noon, I was about to enjoy a leisurely lunch when... Who could it be? My mobile phone on the table vibrated with an incoming call. It was Michael, who was supposed to be at work. Hello, Michael? What's up?
Mom. There's something we need to talk about. Sorry, but can you come over to my place now?
That's fine, but what's happened? The unusual tone in my son's voice gave me a bad feeling. But I knew that pressing him for answers over the phone would likely yield nothing. Suppressing my desire to get things clear right then, I decided to head over to his house. Fortunately, considering situations like this, his house was within a bus ride's distance. Not exactly a leisurely walkable distance, but still conveniently located for emergencies like this. After a bus ride of several minutes, familiar with the scenery by now, I got off at the familiar bus stop and could see Michael's condominium a short walk away. Entering the entrance, I pressed Michael's apartment number and rang the doorbell. The initially unfamiliar autolock entrance had become quite familiar to me by now. After a while, I heard the sound of the intercom connecting.
Mom. Welcome. I'll unlock it now.
Hearing my son's feeble voice, the lock was indeed released, and the automatic door in front of me quietly opened. However, I couldn't immediately walk through. I wondered about Linda. A sudden question popped into my mind. Being a housewife, it wouldn't be strange for Linda to be at home at this time. She might have gone shopping. But given the condition Michael sounded in, it seemed unlikely he would be left alone, especially knowing his mother was coming over. If it was just shopping, she could have left after I arrived.
Mom, the door's closing?
Snapped back to reality by Michael's puzzled voice, I hurried through the autolock door. Given it was a weekday afternoon, there was an eerie absence of people beyond the door. The hallway lights were off because it was daytime, and its dimness only accelerated the bad feeling I had been having.
It's okay. It's just me being paranoid.
Trying not to be overwhelmed by the atmosphere, I shook off the bad feeling as hard as I could. I took the elevator up to the floor where Michael's apartment was and headed straight for their door. Ringing the doorbell once more. There was no answer. But assuming the visitor was being checked on the monitor, I soon heard the unlocking sound, and the door carelessly opened wide. Michael appeared, looking haggard in a sloppy t-shirt and pants, unusual for the middle of a weekday. My bad feeling intensified.
Mom, sorry for the suddenness.
What's going on? This definitely wasn't just anything. I was about to press for answers, but was instead urged to come inside. Michael had a point. Given the situation, it was probably something he didn't want the neighbors to overhear. Reluctantly entering the apartment, I noticed Linda was nowhere to be seen. Moreover, for a family of 3, the sight of uneaten packaging and used dishes left as is was concerning.
Sorry, I haven't been able to clean up a bit.
That's fine. Well, it's not fine, but you're going to tell me what's going on, right? What happened? Where's Linda? Barely finding a spot to sit, I lowered myself onto the living room sofa, facing Michael across the table. Seemingly struggling to speak, Michael repeatedly started to say something only to stop himself. However, having made up his mind, he finally shared something unbelievable. It all started last month. during a health checkup at his company. Though Michael used to catch colds frequently as a child, he hadn't been sick since becoming an adult. Yet, he failed the health checkup. He was told that he needed a thorough examination urgently. Indeed, around the time of the health checkup, he had been feeling unusually tired, but with the busyness of work, he thought little of it. Even when told he needed a detailed examination, he initially took it as a fluke. But upon undergoing further tests, urged by his company and for peace of mind, it was discovered he had developed a difficult-to-treat rare disease. And at just 28 years old, the disease was progressing quickly, affecting his ability to work by the time the examination results came in. As a result, Michael had to quit his job and, as the disease gradually impacted his daily life, it became clear he would eventually need care. I couldn't grasp the situation immediately. My son, having a rare disease and needing care to such an extent. Despite taking care to live healthily, avoiding smoking and heavy drinking. How could this happen? I didn't want to believe it. The absence of Linda and the disarray of the room led me to an even worse feeling. Speaking of which, Linda is late, isn't she? Has she gone shopping, or is she picking up Sarah? Yes. Linda, his wife who hadn't been seen or mentioned until now. She must have a reason for being out. Just out. I tried to convince myself, but reason told me it was overly optimistic. Yet I mentioned it anyway. But as soon as I mentioned Linda's name, Michael's face grew even darker. Just that was enough to confirm my fears. Linda took Sarah and left. She said she couldn't handle it anymore. Michael said with a bitter laugh, though it was far from funny. I had suspected as much, but hearing it was a shock. She couldn't handle it. I almost blurted out in blame towards Linda and hastily stopped myself. It didn't necessarily have to be home care, there were other options. If she had consulted me, I could have helped with housework or taking care of Sarah. I understand the shock of suddenly having an unemployed husband with a rare disease needing care. But leaving like this seemed unjustifiable. Which is why, Mom, I'm sorry to say, but you're the only one I can rely on now. I wasn't so foolish as to not understand the situation. With his wife gone, I was the only one he could depend on. That must be why. I understand. I'll take care of you as much as I can. Let's start with cleaning up the house, shall we? While the task was daunting, succumbing to despair would only hasten the disease's progression. I had to avoid showing reluctance or dismay, as it would only accelerate my son's illness. So, I chose to end on a brighter note. It seemed to have an impact on him, however small. Perhaps because of the disease's toll on his once lively days. His smile was stiff. "Thank you," he replied. The caregiving days that followed felt both long and short, a state I couldn't quite describe. Moving from my house to live with my son wasn't feasible, so I began living with him for home care. I stayed in the room that Sarah, taken away by Linda, used to occupy. Home care was a new territory for me, and honestly, I didn't know where to start. Even trying to research at the local library was of little help, as most resources were aimed at caring for the elderly, unfortunately not applicable to our situation. I did consult the hospital where he was being treated, but I'm sorry, but the hospital primarily focuses on treatment. Regarding home care, I'm afraid we can only offer advice similar to what you'd receive for standard care. It's slightly different, but we can hospitalize patients with rare diseases temporarily. However, that's only for cases where caregivers, like family members, are unable to provide care at home due to reasons such as needing rest. And, again, it's only temporary, so there's a limit to how many days you can apply for within a year. Therefore, we don't offer permanent hospital care. That was their response. In the end, it seemed like I had no choice but to learn as I went. I hadn't really considered hiring a helper or placing him in a facility. I felt bad, but the idea of a stranger coming into our home to help was unsettling. And despite my inexperience, I was hesitant to entrust my son to a facility. Difficulty finding a place due to his age and the severity of his disease played a part as well. Nonetheless, I continued to care for Michael as best I could, though reality proved to be harsh. His youth did not spare him, the disease worsened daily, and less than a year into my caregiving, my efforts felt in vain as Michael passed away. Thank you for coming despite your busy schedules. I greeted each family member who attended Michael's funeral. Though she had left, Linda, still legally his wife, was informed about Michael's passing over the phone. I tried to reach out, but whether she was busy or for some other reason, she didn't answer, so I left a message on her voicemail, and I ended up being the representative on the day. Not that the relatives didn't comment on it. Some openly criticized Linda for her absence. But I couldn't reveal everything there and could only respond with a wry smile. That's when it happened. Is this where my husband's funeral is taking place? Linda appeared suddenly. Her footsteps echoing, pulling a much thinner Sarah by the hand. Linda, where have you been all this time? Well, Margaret. It's quite hypocritical to kick me and Sarah out and then act like this. Her accusation surprised me. I knew where she had been, making my question somewhat insincere. But me, kicking them out? She was the one who left on her own. Ignoring me, Linda dramatically appealed to those around her like a tragic heroine. Everyone, please listen. When I told her my husband needed care for his rare disease, she suddenly came and kicked me and Sarah out. She said she would take care of her son herself and that outsiders should leave. Even when I tried to return because I was worried about my husband, she threatened to call the police if I came any closer. We were suddenly thrown out without money, and look how pitiful Sarah has become. Luckily, we managed to return to my parents' house, but who knows what would have happened otherwise. Well, a person who kicks out her daughter-in-law and granddaughter to get her son's inheritance probably wouldn't care about us anyway. Linda feigned tears, seeking sympathy from the crowd. With Sarah's emaciated figure beside her, she must have thought she painted the perfect picture of a grieving wife and a monstrous mother-in-law greedy for her son's inheritance. Just as Michael feared. I sighed. I had prepared something just in case something like this happened, but I never thought Michael's fears would become reality. What are you talking about? Even though I properly informed you about his funeral, you show up late and start making accusations. The one who has been acting as they please is you, Margaret. I was worried about Michael. Can you still say you were worried about Michael after seeing this? I took an envelope and a DVD from my bag. To anyone else, it would look like an ordinary envelope. Not just Linda, but the other relatives watching the situation also looked puzzled. I'm sorry for the timing, but there's something I absolutely must tell you all. So, please bear with me for just a few moments before the funeral begins. I only found out about this because Michael told me, but apparently, some funeral homes now offer services like playing tribute videos or last video letters during funerals. Though I doubt anyone else would use such a service in this way. The venue had been briefed beforehand, so the arrangements to play the DVD I had prepared were quickly made. It was infuriating to show such a video at my son's funeral, but this was also Michael's last wish. I asked everyone present to gather in the hall for a moment. Once all the attending relatives had taken their seats, I signaled the staff to start playing the DVD. Recording a video like this makes me kind of nervous. Appeared Michael on the screen, sitting up in bed, back when he could still speak. The attendees probably expected a touching final message from Michael. Unfortunately, the content was far from touching, a fact only I was privy to. Michael continued in the video.
I guess most of you don't know me, but since this is also a sort of last will, let me introduce myself. I'm Michael. At the time of recording this, I'm 28 years old. Should I also include the date to make it clear?
As he attempted to get up, a hand reached out with a digital clock with a calendar function, handing it to Michael. Of course, that was my hand.
Thanks, Mom. This should serve as proof of the date, right? Well, I'll have you transcribe my will later, so it's all good. If you're watching this, I guess I'm no longer in this world. I'm sorry if this is playing at my funeral. This isn't meant to be a touching video commemorating an individual.
Not just the relatives, but even Linda seemed taken aback by my son's words. The only ones not surprised were me, knowing the truth, Sarah, who couldn't grasp the situation, and the funeral staff, maintaining their professionalism.
I had Mom play this video in case Linda tried to spin lies and set Mom up. So, if this is playing, unfortunately, it means that has happened.
The murmuring in the hall grew louder. Amidst the noise, Linda yelled out,
"Me setting up Margaret? That's ridiculous! Stop this right now!"
But out of respect for the deceased's wishes, none of the staff moved to stop the video, which mercilessly continued.
I have something else I need to tell you all. My wife, Linda, has been having an affair, despite having a child, Sarah.
The murmurs turned into outright gasps. Some covered their mouths in disbelief, while others looked at Linda with disdain.
Linda will probably deny it. I expected as much. That's why I asked Mom to hire a detective agency to gather evidence. Before playing this video, Mom probably showed you an envelope. Inside, you'll find photos and other proof of the affair. It's not pleasant, but for those who can't believe it, Mom, would you mind showing them?
At this point, Linda was the only one doubting Michael's words. Following the video's instructions, I took out the evidence from the envelope and spread it out like a deck of cards. There were pictures of Linda arm in arm with an unknown man, some even showing them kissing. The disdain directed at Linda intensified. She glared at me, looking as if she might leap at me any moment. But it was too late. She knew that acting out now would only worsen her situation. All she could do was clench her teeth and glare.
Now, I'd like to discuss the real reason I left this video. Some of you may have guessed, but it's to clarify the distribution of my estate after I'm gone. Including that reason, I've decided that all my inheritance will go to my daughter, Sarah. Even though she's only 6 years old now, or at least at the time of recording this video. But I'm pretty sure my body won't hold up until Sarah becomes an adult. Probably. Since she'll still be a child when the matter of inheritance comes up, I've of course appointed a special representative, a lawyer, to handle it.
As for the life insurance, I've designated Margaret, my mother, as the beneficiary.
I would have preferred to make Sarah the beneficiary, but given her age, I wasn't sure if she could consent to it, so I chose to set it up this way deliberately. I've also told Mom to use the life insurance payout for Sarah as much as possible. Just in case, I've written a will to this effect and asked for it to be stored appropriately, in case a video alone doesn't hold up legally.
The son in the video gives a wry smile. Unfortunately, there was not a single laugh in the venue.
Is it about time? Just a little more before I end. Sarah, I have mixed feelings about wanting you here for this, but assuming you are, I'm sorry I have to leave you behind. Dad will always wish for your happiness.
And with that, Michael's video ended. The room was filled with a silence that condemned Linda. But it was Linda herself who broke it.
What the heck? Everyone's treating me like I'm the villain here. Yes, Just like my husband said, I had an affair. So what? I have Sarah, don't I? Isn't it obvious that a man with a future is better for Sarah, who won't have to suffer, than a husband who's going to die soon?
Linda defiantly justified her affair, using her own daughter as an excuse. It was almost refreshing to see her come to this point. The one to shatter her self-justified righteousness was none other than Sarah.
I wasn't happy at all. Because, Mom, you were always happy with some man I don't know, and you never paid attention to me. Sarah! What are you saying?
Linda panicked, trying to stop her daughter, but Sarah continued unabated.
And Mom was happy with some man I don't know even when Dad was healthy. You told me not to tell Dad. Sarah! Stop it right now! Do you enjoy troubling your mom?
Linda raised her voice at Sarah, oblivious to the fact that she was further damning herself.
Now you see? You have no allies. You've even turned your own daughter against you. And as the video mentioned, my son entrusted Sarah to me. If you still insist on being Sarah's parent, I will contest custody.
Linda had no response, just a frustrated glare. Then, she forcefully tried to pull Sarah away from the scene.
No! I want to stay with Grandma. Sarah! Wait a minute!
Ignoring Sarah's refusal and my attempt to intervene, Linda, with a demonic expression, disappeared from view. I didn't know what she might do to Sarah next. A relative stopped me as I tried to chase after them.
Wait, Margaret. Stopping her now will only make us look bad. But right now, she still has the upper hand as Sarah's mother. Trying to forcibly take her back would only be treated as kidnapping, worsening your position. We'll make sure to investigate and help Sarah, don't worry.
With those words, I hesitated but had no choice but to back down. Rushing would only cause more harm. It's best to leave it to the professionals. It was frustrating, but all I could do was trust those words. Weeks after the tragic funeral, the results came surprisingly quickly. As Sarah said, her situation was dire, and the Child and Family Services decided she needed urgent protection. Furthermore, Linda and her lover, aiming for Michael's money, were now living in even greater poverty. If Linda hadn't burst into the funeral, if Sarah hadn't shared her circumstances then, the situation surrounding Sarah could have been much worse. The thought still sends shivers down my spine. It was clear that Sarah couldn't possibly be happy in such an environment, leading to a swift decision in my favor regarding custody. Following Michael's will, the insurance money was used for Sarah's education and living expenses, allowing her to lead a comfortable life and receive a good education. Thanks to this, the emaciated figure she had shown at the funeral seemed like a lie as she grew into a healthy individual. She went on to middle school and high school, where she joined sports clubs and showed an active side of herself. However, life with her wasn't without its challenges. Just once. Yes, just once, that woman, Linda, came to our house. Even through the grainy monitor, her miserably dressed figure was evident, her eyes like those of a wicked witch in a fairy tale, as she said,
Sarah, Sarah, my sweet daughter. Come, let's go home with Mom. Who are you? My mother is Margaret only. Please leave.
Sarah firmly rejected her with a resolute voice. But I noticed her body trembling slightly.
Sarah, have you forgotten your mom's face? I guess it's been years, and you were so little. It can't be helped.
Even after being rejected, Linda persisted, seeing Sarah tremble more at the sight of her ghost-like figure. I couldn't stand it and raised my voice.
Enough! Sarah is my child. If you don't leave now, I'll call the police.
Perhaps it was my stern warning, or maybe Linda was shocked that Sarah didn't speak up for her, but she left with the gait of a ghost and never showed herself to us again.
Looking back, we really went through a lot.
I spoke to the grave as petals danced in the wind. The photo in my hands was of my late husband and Michael in healthier times. Today, I had something to report to Michael.
Sarah is starting college today. Children grow up so fast.
Yes, today was Sarah's first day of college. The little girl who once barely reached my waist had grown so quickly, surpassing my height and blossoming into a wonderful young woman. Remembering her frail figure from that day and seeing how much she's grown brought tears to my eyes.
I know you would have wanted to be here to watch over her, but since you can't, I'm doing it in your stead. So rest easy there. Well, I don't know how much longer it will be.
Joking in this manner, it felt as if Michael's photo also gave a wry smile.